The courthouse parking facility was tranquil that afternoon, but the events that transpired there later would become known throughout the nation. A woman, identified as Helen, operating a white sport utility vehicle, arrived at approximately 2:45 in the afternoon. She navigated the compact lot, disregarded the 3 vacant spots at the rear, and came to a halt directly before a conspicuously marked sign that proclaimed, "Reserved for Judge Marcus Hale." The sign was substantial, readily apparent, and utterly impossible to overlook. Nevertheless, Helen determined it did not pertain to her. She parked beneath it, secured her vehicle, and departed with an air of complete self-assurance, as though she possessed ownership of the premises. 4 minutes subsequently, a dark-colored sedan entered the lot. The driver was Judge Marcus, an African-American gentleman in his mid-40s. He was not attired in formal wear that day, as he had attended a conference across town and made a brief stop to collect certain documents. The presence of someone occupying his reserved space did not elicit surprise. This had occurred previously, but it consistently proved vexing. He approached with composure, prepared to request the driver to relocate. At that precise moment, Helen emerged from the courthouse, keys in hand. Marcus extended a courteous greeting and explained that the space was allocated to him. Her expression underwent an immediate transformation. She frowned, drew nearer, and commenced an argument. He gestured towards the sign as substantiation, but she refused to hearken. "Before we proceed further, please indicate in the comments section from where in the world you are observing, and ensure you subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you will not wish to miss." Helen elevated her voice, accusing Marcus of fabrication, asserting that individuals of his background consistently sought to claim what was not rightfully theirs. Her tone was acerbic, and her demeanor indicated a lack of belief that he belonged there. She retrieved her mobile device and began recording him, as if she were the aggrieved party. What she failed to apprehend was that the courthouse's closed-circuit television camera, positioned above them, was also documenting the entire incident. Marcus maintained his composure. He stood with his hands visible, speaking respectfully, while Helen orbited him with her phone, vocalizing loudly and gesturing animatedly. Spectators within the courthouse could already discern her voice resonating through the windows. She persisted in her accusations, disregarding the substantial sign situated directly beside her. A few courthouse employees and guards peered out from within, uncertain of the unfolding situation. Marcus did not augment his volume or advance. He simply recorded her in return. This action incited her further. She resorted to disparaging remarks, suggesting he did not project the image of an important individual, and attempted to compel him to vacate his own parking bay. When Marcus elected to cease engagement, he proceeded toward the courthouse entrance to summon assistance. However, Helen had not concluded her actions. She followed, continuing to record and vociferating as if her increased volume equated to greater justification. As Marcus entered the courthouse, a guard intercepted her at the doorway, requesting her to calm herself and remain outside. She engaged in an argument with him as well, pointing past him and demanding that Marcus be removed. 2 additional security personnel arrived through a separate entrance to provide support. Now 3 officers stood in the parking area with Helen, endeavoring to pacify her. Instead, she continued her performance, pointing to the sign, then her vehicle, then the direction Marcus had departed. She was attempting to portray herself as the victim. One of the guards examined the parking designation and confirmed its accuracy, that the spot was allocated to a judge. Upon informing her of this fact, she refused to depart. She crossed her arms and declared she was not moving. The guards exchanged glances. One communicated via radio to the interior to report the predicament. Concurrently, Marcus was articulating the circumstances to the courthouse administration, requesting that the matter be addressed appropriately and officially recorded. The situation outside continued to escalate. Helen's voice carried across the parking lot, sharp and imperious. She maintained that she was subjected to unfair treatment and contended that she possessed the absolute right to park wherever she pleased. Her pronouncements grew louder and more agitated as a modest assembly began to converge. Some individuals observed with curiosity, while others expressed disapproval by shaking their heads. Several minutes later, the rear entrance opened once more. Marcus emerged, serene and self-possessed, this time accompanied by another judge, an elder Caucasian gentleman known for his stern disposition, along with the head of security and 2 courthouse administrators. Helen wasted no time. She recommenced her vocalizations, pointing accusing fingers at Marcus and alleging harassment. Her tone was imbued with indignation, as though she anticipated the senior judge to corroborate her claims. However, the gentleman's expression was glacial and unyielding. He directed a firm, appraising gaze at her that caused her words to falter mid-utterance. He then indicated the reserved sign, the one clearly denoting Marcus's designated area. The realization struck Helen instantaneously. The name on the sign corresponded with the individual she had been assailing. Marcus was not merely an employee, he was the judge whose name was prominently inscribed in bold letters. Apprehension supplanted her prior confidence. Her voice became rapid and laced with nervousness. She attempted to rationalize her conduct, asserting it was a misunderstanding, that she had not observed the sign, and that she would have relocated immediately had she been aware. Her justifications tumbled forth, but it was too late. The closed-circuit television footage and the accounts of eyewitnesses had already established that she had seen the sign and deliberately disregarded it. The elder judge did not raise his voice. He simply instructed her to move the vehicle without delay. Helen hurried to her sport utility vehicle, nearly stumbling in her haste. She reversed with such abruptness that she nearly scraped the curb before ultimately parking at a considerable distance at the far end of the lot. She slumped into the driver's seat, attempting to become inconspicuous, hoping no one else would notice her. However, the courthouse was obligated to enforce its regulations. Approximately 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. They approached Helen, questioned her briefly, and issued citations for parking in a restricted zone and causing a public disturbance. Throughout the entire ordeal, Marcus remained composed. He did not engage in arguments, raise his voice, or display irritation. He simply allowed the proceedings to unfold organically. Helen's arrogance, once strident and defiant, had now transformed into palpable mortification. She was learning, perhaps too late, that a sense of entitlement carries consequences, and no amount of shouting can alter fundamental truth. Over the subsequent week, the courthouse meticulously reviewed all accumulated evidence, including closed-circuit television recordings, mobile phone footage, and detailed witness testimonies. Each fragment contributed to a consistent depiction. Helen had exhibited aggression, disrespect, and was demonstrably motivated by prejudice. It constituted a clear instance of harassment and defamation, and Marcus was resolved not to permit it to pass without consequence. He elected to pursue legal recourse through the appropriate avenues. With a steady hand and an unruffled mind, he initiated a civil lawsuit against Helen, seeking accountability for her transgressions. Helen attempted to present her defense utilizing the brief mobile phone video she had captured, hoping it would portray her as the injured party. However, when Marcus's legal counsel presented the comprehensive closed-circuit television footage, her narrative disintegrated instantly. The cameras clearly showed her pushing, shouting at, and mocking Marcus in ways that were undeniable. Every endeavor to distort the established facts was rendered futile by the irrefutable weight of objective reality. It became unequivocally evident to all observers that Marcus had been subjected to unjust targeting, and Helen's comportment was entirely inexcusable. The court ultimately rendered a verdict in favor of Marcus. Helen had no alternative but to consent to a settlement, one that imposed a far greater financial burden than she had anticipated. News organizations promptly seized upon the narrative, and it disseminated rapidly across social media platforms, within local newspapers, and even on national media outlets. Headlines proclaimed, "Woman harasses Black judge in his own parking spot and faces lawsuit." Her identity became widely recognized, and the ensuing public scrutiny affected her profoundly. She experienced job termination, a decline in her social standing, and numerous individuals she considered friends distanced themselves from her. The incident, initially a manifestation of personal hubris, had escalated into a public lesson in accountability. In the interim, Marcus quietly resumed his daily routine, garnering widespread commendation for his professionalism and equanimity. Colleagues and members of the community alike admired his handling of a tense and personal confrontation without succumbing to anger. His calm and measured response served as an illustration of how to confront ignorance with dignity and strategic thinking rather than emotional reaction. Inspired by the case, the courthouse instituted revised policies, enhanced signage in parking areas, additional security training for its personnel, and more clearly defined protocols for reporting instances of harassment. Helen attempted to position herself as a casualty of cancel culture, but the corroborating evidence overshadowed her assertions. Public sentiment overwhelmingly supported Marcus, and her efforts to minimize her culpability proved unsuccessful. Ultimately, she issued a concise statement conveying a general sense of regret, yet refrained from offering a genuine apology. Conversely, Marcus's integrity remained unblemished, fortified by the certainty that justice had been administered. In summation, the imparted lesson was unambiguous. Justice was not achieved through confrontation or vociferous shouting, but rather through perseverance, meticulous record-keeping, and permitting the truth to assert itself. Helen's presumption precipitated the downfall of her peace and her reputation, while Marcus's composure re-established his dignity and secured him the esteem of the community. Occasionally, the most potent riposte to ignorance is not anger or retribution. It is a quiet assurance in truth and an unwavering conviction that justice in its purest form will ultimately prevail.